Good evening, Tulane parents. This is Penny Wyatt, the Director of Parent Programs and External Relations for the Division of Student Affairs. I'm so happy you've joined us this evening for our Study Abroad Opportunities at Tulane University webinar for parents. I'm really pleased to have my colleague Scott Pencer, who's the Associate Dean for Global Education in Newcomb-Tulane College, who will present the webinar information. But before we get started with the content, I'd like to just review a couple of procedural things. If some of you have participated in our other webinars, you'll be familiar with these, but I just want to kind of outline these for everyone at first. So first of all, I just want to remind you that you are not mic'd, so you won't be able to talk to us, but you will have the opportunity to submit questions, and you can type those in. We ask that you hold your questions until the end because we have tried to anticipate a lot of your questions and included that in the slides, but we'll give you a heads up when we're at that point where you can submit your questions. And if we don't get to all the questions during the webinar, we'll follow up by email with you about those. Also, either this evening or tomorrow morning, I will send everyone who registered for the webinar a PDF of the webinar slides so that you can review this information. So you don't really need to take notes so much while you're listening tonight. You'll get all of this information in an email. And then by probably Friday, we will have the whole video recording of the webinar posted on our website. And that's parents.tulane.edu. And then you go to the tab that says Communication with Parents, and you'll find the webinar section, and just look in the webinar archive for 2016-17, and you'll find the link to the recording. So one other thing I'd like to ask, just to make sure everything's working, is to ask you to use on your control panel the little hand raising function, and raise your hand if you can hear the the webinar. If you can hear me. Great. I see hands raised, so makes me think everything's working. I appreciate that. This is the audio level, the volume for the webinar. If you need to adjust that, you can do that on your end, on your computer. So keep that in mind. So I think that's about it. I'm really pleased that so many people are interested in this topic. We really are proud of our study abroad program here at Tulane, and we certainly hope that your students are considering this opportunity. And we hope that you get a lot out of tonight's webinar and helps you have the conversations you need to have with your student about how this might work for them and your family. So I'm going to turn things over to Scott now.
Thank you very much, Penny. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. Just to let you know a little bit about what it means to be an Associate Dean of Global Education at Tulane. That means I have the privilege of directing a place we call the Center for Global Education. Those of you who visited our campus, you might know where the PJ's is down on Willow Street, and we have a house there. And in the Center for Global Education, a lot of interesting things go on. We have the Office of Study Abroad, which I'm going to talk to you about in more detail in just a minute. But I think it's also important for you to know that that is also the home for Tulane's over 1,000 international students and scholars. Tulane attracts students and scholars from all around the world. They come here to do graduate and professional education. They increasingly come here as part of our undergraduate classes. We've been increasing our number of international students pretty significantly over the last couple of years and plan to do so more in the future. And their home is in the same home where your students might be coming to learn more about study abroad. And one of our long-term goals here at Tulane is to get these groups of students to know each other better. Not just the study abroad students, but pretty much all of our Tulane undergraduates, because having the international students here is this wonderful opportunity, which we have not yet taken enough advantage of, for students to have an international experience really without even leaving our campus. So what we do at CGE is study abroad, international students and scholars, and we also have a program there that helps international students with their academic English skills. And that is also something where our return study abroad students come back, and many of them feel very enthusiastic based on their experience abroad, being the international student, being the student, dealing perhaps with a new language or new culture. They'll come back and help some of our ESL students improve their skills through language exchange, and are just kind of very enthusiastic about helping them get to know Tulane better. So that's kind of what my position is. I always like to point out the reason why I think I'm in this position is because of study abroad. You'll find in this field lots of true believers. Most of us are doing it because we did it when we were undergraduates and it changed our lives. And that is not at all an understatement for what happened with me. I had not traveled much as a high school student. And when I went to college, studying abroad became sort of a necessity, because to graduate I was going to have to be proficient in a foreign language. And I figured I better try out all that Spanish I've learned in high school abroad. And I went and I spent a year living in Costa Rica. This was back in the 1980s. And that year pretty much changed everything for me. I came back from my study abroad experience with a clear idea of what my major was, kind of a clear focus for the interest I already had in international relations, and also very clearly committed to doing it again. I came back from my junior year abroad, and I finished up my senior year and went and was a volunteer in Peru the first year after I graduated college. And since then, I've been back to live overseas several times. I guess in total I've lived abroad maybe about 10 years in different times in my life, all of it in Latin America. So it all started with that junior year abroad that I did as an undergraduate. So it's something that I really feel very strongly about, and I really feel very, very fortunate to be able to work with students and to get them to have this experience that I had, and to try to make it the best experience possible for them. So we'll move to the first slide. Let me see if this is my first webinar. So let me see. I hit it. There we go. Wait.
Click it.
Click this.
Just click the mouse and then hit the arrow.
All right. There we go. So here are the objectives of the presentation. I'll let you kind of read through them, but just to kind of cut to to get to the basic ideas, I want to leave lots of time for your questions. The idea here is really to give you all a sense of the kinds of things we're talking to your students about, right? So the sorts of questions we want them to consider, the sorts of things we explain to them about in terms of planning and kind of when to study abroad, so that we all can work together to give them the best advice possible as they prepare to do this. So those are the objectives for the presentation. So this is my favorite slide. When we do this presentation on campus in person, sometimes we do it in the summer, we'll call this presentation the FAQs for study abroad, frequently asked questions for study abroad, or questions we think ought to be more frequently asked. And this is the big one, I think. Why study abroad? It's a really important question for students to ask. They'll have different answers to that question at different phases of the process as they think about doing it, once they've done it, once they've come back. And so we want them to get in the habit of asking themselves this question. We're going to ask it to them. We strongly encourage you all to ask it to them. We don't do it in a way to kind of to kind of put them on the spot, but for reasons I'll mention in a minute, we just think it's a good habit for them to develop. Not deciding to study abroad simply because it's kind of the thing to do, or maybe one of my siblings did it, or one of my friends at school did it. We'll take whatever answer students have to that question because we want them to study abroad, but we want them to kind of dig a little bit deeper. We want them to come up with their own answer to this. And I'll start just by sharing with you, Tulane's answer, and probably more my personal answer also, as to why we think study abroad is such an important thing for students to do. A lot of it boils down to the fact that, we want our graduates to be successful in their careers. We want them to be able to make contributions to the issues that matter to them as citizens once they leave Tulane. And to be quite frank with you, we want them to be happy. And we think that to do that, to be able to achieve those things, one of the unique things we can offer them during their 4 years as undergraduates is the opportunity to get a clear sense of, their place in the world, what matters to them, what their strengths are, what their gifts are, what they want to do with their lives. And so I think one of the basic facts that our students need to think about more, we all need to think about more, is that the world that they live in, is global. And I like to emphasize how this has maybe changed a little bit differently. I know that, for a long time now, educators and people have been saying, the world, we ought to think about the world more in terms of a community, or that the world ought to be a more global place, or the world ought to be, we ought to all be more cosmopolitan. We talk about it in a very aspirational sense. And I think that's still important. We still need to do that. It is still something to aspire to. We can always be more cosmopolitan, more inclusive in the way we think about the world. But I think it's important to point out, it may seem obvious, but that there really is no kind of aspirational element to this so much anymore as it's just a fact, that the world operates kind of in every aspect of the world that I think matters to our students. It operates globally, right? I can't think of a career, a life that students will have after Tulane that will not require and certainly benefit from them having a serious global dimension to their education. Understanding how the world works today requires you to think beyond the United States, right? You have to understand how things are interconnected. And there are lots of ways that students can do that, of course, without leaving Tulane. And this is very important, and we'll continue to work on this because while about a third of our students now typically study abroad, not all students do, not all students can. That doesn't mean that they do not also need to get this global dimension of their education. So, we offer lots of courses on campus. Tulane, we have a broad array of area studies courses. We have one of the best undergraduate Latin American studies programs in the country, which I always point out because I'm a proud graduate of their graduate program in Latin American studies. But Latin American studies is not the only thing we do here. We have an Asian studies program, Africana studies. Students can study a variety of languages, right, from Arabic to Mandarin. We have Haitian Creole. We have French, Spanish, Portuguese, one of the few places that students can do both Spanish and Portuguese. So we offer lots of coursework, lots of ways that students can build knowledge about the world, which is very important. This is also where I like to point out, again, the presence of these international students on campus. Your students quite likely have international students, living with them in the university residence halls. They have them in their classrooms. We have a weekly thing now that we do in the Center for Global Education every Monday that we call the Global Cafe. It's right here in the LBC, where we have an afternoon coffee hour. We invite all internationally minded students to come and get to know each other and to discuss things. So those are ways that students without studying abroad can also begin to think about what matters to them from this global perspective. But of course, what study abroad does, what's so uniquely, I think, what's such a wonderful thing about it, is it gives the experiential dimension to this global education we want all of their students to have, right? So study abroad is this opportunity for students who, and again, I think all of us can say this, we're all exposed to a lot of information about the world. It's now become cliche to say that, the whole world is at our fingertips right here at the internet. But it's not the same as being there, right? It's not the same as, to read about another country or to study its language as it is to go there and kind of daily live it, right? And what we find with our students when they come back is that it's, the things that change them, the experiences that really impress them when they're abroad, can be surprising, right? So of course, there are courses and professors and universities that totally change the way they look at what matters to them academically, and we're very pleased about that, and we're always looking for that when we choose programs. But oftentimes too, it's the small things. We have students who go abroad, and if you ask them, the story they want to tell you about how they developed some skills abroad or the way that they kind of changed abroad, oftentimes the go-to story is the public transportation story, which I think all of us know. One of the things we have to be humble about as citizens of the United States is we don't necessarily do public transportation as well as the rest of the world does. And so our students will come back and they'll say, well, look, this is the first time I lived in a place where, I had to figure out the bus system, the train system on my own to get around. We have students who go to places like, Denmark and the Netherlands, and they come back just charmed that they spent a semester in a country where most people get around by bicycle. So they learn they kind of learn to operate is what I'm trying to say here. One thing that study abroad makes you do is not just learn how other countries study, learn to study things in their language, learn to work within their academic culture, learn to work within, to kind of think about the questions that they think are most important, to look at things from another point of view. But it's also these sort of tacit skills that students pick up, where they learn that they can feel confident, they can make a contribution, they can succeed, anywhere. Right, and this of course is something that we all enjoy watching students do as they move through their college careers. Right, they come from home, they come from living with you to a place like to New Orleans, and they learn that they can adapt to this new city, to this new university, and then study abroad is another step on that same path. And one I can say just from personal experience, what study abroad did for me was it just gave me this larger sense of home. I had a much clearer idea of the broad variety of places where, despite all the real challenges and adjustments you have to make, that I could still feel at home and I could still have real connections and real relationships with people in places that I never would have imagined that happening before I studied abroad. So I think this is what the study abroad opportunity offers to students. It gives them this experiential addition, or this experiential piece to this global education that they all really need to have. So this is that's a long, and I could go on and on, but I will not. One thing about the webinars, I can't see if people are glazing or not, so I will move on. But these are the reasons why Tulane is really strongly behind study abroad. But the most important thing, again, is for students to have their own answer to this question of why they're doing it. This is something we know from research on study abroad, is that students who go into the experience with kind of a clear idea of what their goals are, why they're doing it, are simply more likely to come out of it having made real progress towards achieving those goals or getting close to achieving them. One thing I'll mention in a minute about study abroad these days is that a year abroad is not as typical as it used to be for a variety of reasons. Study abroad tends to be oftentimes a more short-term experience. Most Tulane students go for a semester, but still 4 months can fly by. And if you don't go into those 4 months with kind of an idea of why you're there, that very much these are not 4 months off, these are 4 months on, doing something that is kind of a unique opportunity in your life, and a unique opportunity to build these important skills. That if you going in with a clear idea of what you're trying to get out of it makes it more likely that you'll do that. So we ask students from the very first time they walk into our office, what are your goals for study abroad? Why are you doing this? Why do you what do you in particular want to get out of this experience? And then we also do that because we think this why question is very important, because it comes up when they come back. I think that all of us, who have been through, any kind of a job interview or application for graduate school or whatever it is that we've done in our professional lives, and maybe many of you out there, as I have now, have done some interviewing. I think we know when you get a resume where somebody says that they've spent an extended amount of time in some very interesting part of the world, at least for me, maybe this is professional bias, the first thing I'm going to ask them about is that, right? So if I see that a student has spent a semester abroad, in China, I'm going to ask them, well, what was that semester in Shanghai? How did that go? What can you tell me about that? And the answer that none of us want our students to say in that situation, we sympathize with them, our heart goes out to them, you're on the spot, but we don't want them to say, it was great, it was awesome, right? I had a great time. We know that there's more to it than that, right? You certainly know because, because you've known them their whole lives and you know all that's there, and we know because we've worked with them that there's more to it than that. But they need to be able to present pretty quickly to somebody who doesn't know them so well that they're a person who kind of thinks carefully about why they do things and can give a clear account about why they chose to spend several months abroad, what their goals were, what they got out of it, and what that experience permits them to offer to a prospective employer, graduate school, any kind of opportunity they look for after Tulane. So again, this habit of thinking about why will serve them well in all kinds of contexts, starting with study abroad and when they come back. So that's our favorite question, but there are other interesting ones that I'll move on to here. When? This is an interesting one, which if any of you out there who have studied abroad you'll see that some things have changed in study abroad. Many things have changed, but some things that have stayed the same. One of the few things that I think has stayed the same is that most students studying abroad still do so during the junior year. So that old notion that's we kind of shorthand for study abroad is JYA, junior year abroad. The year isn't so common anymore, but that it happens during the junior year still is common, at least at Tulane. I think the reason for this is that the junior year is when most students have started to develop a good answer to that question of why study abroad is important to them, how it fits. They've kind of made these key choices at Tulane. Usually they've declared their major. They may already be starting to think about what they want to do after Tulane, and then they can go to this decision of study abroad informed with a sense of themselves, what they want to do, and they make good choices. So the junior year is the most common. With that said, we do not prohibit younger students or seniors from studying abroad. We've had freshmen study abroad at Tulane. We've had first semester freshmen study abroad at Tulane. We've had sophomores do it and seniors. So junior year is not the only time, but it's the most common time. Students can, in terms of how long they study abroad, again, students can study abroad for a semester, for an academic year, or for a shorter term like the summer. As I mentioned before, the year abroad, while it is still the most, I think, beloved period of study abroad by people like me who are in the field, we get really excited when students want to study abroad for a whole year because we know that the longer you do it, like anything experiential, the more likelihood that, the more you get out of it. It's an experience that just keeps getting deeper and deeper and more complex. So we like that, but it's a minority of students who do it. So at Tulane, roughly about 10% of the students who study abroad at Tulane will do so for a year. This year, I think overall we maybe sent about 400 students abroad, and 30, 33, 34, something like that, have studied abroad for a whole academic year. The majority of our students study abroad for a semester, and given certain peculiarities of Tulane and New Orleans, our students prefer the fall semester for study abroad. This is because, of course, in the spring we have Mardi Gras, we have all kinds of wonderful things going on in New Orleans in the spring. And we understand that we're not total duds in the Office of Study Abroad. We know when students want to enjoy themselves, but we do seriously will ask them, and we kind of ask for you all maybe to assist us in this, in kind of not letting students assume. What we don't want them to do is rule out options that they may regret later, right? So we understand, we get it, why students want to be here in the spring. But choosing to study abroad or sort of ruling out the spring can rule out certain experiences that may really be what they want and what they need. One example would be, because of the way academic calendars work in Spain, if a student wants to study abroad only for a semester, and they want to do it as a directly enrolled student in a Spanish university where they do everything kind of the Spanish way, the only way they can do that is in the spring, right? And so if they sort of rule out the spring from the get-go, they're ruling that opportunity out. Another thing that we would like for students to consider when they think about, if spring might not be a good time to do this, is that, spring, this wonderful potential combination exists of a spring semester studying abroad followed by a summer in the same place doing maybe a volunteer experience or some kind of an internship. I think we can all imagine how that's really kind of an ideal pair. You spend the spring semester, polishing the language if that's something you're doing, learning, how this city works and kind of getting some real depth of understanding of the context you're in an academic setting, and then you're set up and maybe you can build a network and set up an opportunity to do an internship or something more outside of the classroom in the summer. That doesn't work so well with the fall, right? To kind of go the summer before your fall semester and try to do an internship or something. I imagine it's possible, but it's not. I think we all can see how the spring-summer is really an ideal combination. And again, we don't want students to rule that out without seriously considering it. The other reason some students should keep the spring open as an option is if they are studying abroad in order to achieve some real language proficiency, and if for whatever reason they haven't gotten through as many courses at Tulane in that language as they'd like to kind of build a foundation before going abroad, it can be a really great thing to study the language, take that upper level French class in the fall, so that you're really hitting the ground running when you go to Paris in the spring. So again, all of these are reasons why we're open to sending students to study abroad whichever semester they choose, but we want them to make good choices and informed choices. Summer is an increasingly popular time for students to study abroad. And that's kind of across the board, not just at Tulane, but nationwide. Summer is a time that can work really well for students who simply cannot get off campus during the academic year, for a year or semester. Students, students who are participating in athletics come to mind. There are certain majors where, because of the structure of the curriculum, it can be difficult for students to get off campus during the academic year. And in that case, the summer can be the perfect time to go. So summer has really blossomed for that reason. It's really, I would say, summer study abroad and other short-term experiences have been a way that study abroad has moved beyond its kind of traditional constituency of students like I was, who are studying things like language, history, area studies, and kind of had the time to go for longer periods. Summer makes it possible, for STEM students, again, students in lots of different majors that did not traditionally study abroad to be able to do so. At Tulane, summer is a really good time for students to go abroad with faculty members. So that's one of the things that we like the most about the summer, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, is that this is a time for faculty-led programs and a great opportunity for students and faculty to get to know each other better while doing their coursework and research and inquiry in the field. In terms of the timeline for all of this, right? So our applications now are all completed online. We have an online, it's called Teradata, but if you go to our webpage, it's an online application system. And we have two deadlines for academic year programs, right? So early February is actually the time. I think this year the deadline is going to be about February 6th. We always, again, have to keep Mardi Gras in mind when we set deadlines. But that's the deadline for students who want to study abroad for the academic year, the following academic year, or for the following fall. We'll also accept applications from students in February who know they want to go the following spring. We love early applications because that, of course, indicates students are planning ahead. It allows us to plan ahead in certain ways. So we'll take applications for any kind of any study abroad period in February. But then we'll have a second deadline in early September. I think this year it was September 12th. For students who want to study abroad in the spring semester and didn't know, or didn't get an application in early in February. For our summer programs, I think our applications are typically due, I think the last is typically in March. We like to give students an idea because they want to know, what they're going to be doing in the summer. Students can begin planning early. I think, the earlier they plan, the better. For study abroad. I mean, there are certain steps that that you don't need to take till you need to take them. But again, this bigger project of thinking about study abroad and thinking about where it fits into their overall trajectory at Tulane is something that really can't start too early. And there are some practical reasons why it does need to start early if a student needs to complete certain prerequisites, which for the most part is the case only with foreign language. We have a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, we have a number of programs where students simply cannot apply to study abroad there if they haven't done the prerequisite coursework, language coursework here. And so if that's the case, then students need to start planning that as early as their freshman year to pull that into the curriculum. So, so advising can start early, and we're ready to talk to them in the Office of Study Abroad as soon as they want to come talk to us. And of course, the academic advisors in the Advising Center are quite familiar with study abroad. They're quite familiar with the things that students should keep in mind when they're planning for it, and they're ready to talk to students, whenever. In fact, I think most of our advisors now ask students pretty much in their first meeting if they're planning to study abroad. Okay. This is the next slide, which I guess we call financial planning for study abroad. But just to be clear about, what it'll cost, how to plan for this financially. And I guess that the short summary here, the rule of thumb, is that you should not plan to pay any more in tuition for study abroad than you would for a semester with your student at Tulane. It should be exactly the same. Tulane financial, if the program is approved on our approved list, financial aid carries over. So your student's financial aid package carries over. The only exception to that is if a student has some kind of special housing scholarship, because again, they wouldn't be housed at Tulane, they'd be housed abroad. That, in my experience, is a rather rare case. But again, you should expect the same tuition bill. What can vary is housing, right? And this is an interesting place in terms of decision making and budgeting, because there are places where students can study abroad that are considerably less expensive than a semester in New Orleans, both in terms of housing and out-of-pocket money they might want to spend. And there are places that are considerably more expensive, right? So we have students studying abroad, and typically this is the case in the developing world. Often, exchange rates come into play, where students come back and say, hey, that semester abroad was not particularly expensive. But we also have students who go abroad to places like Europe, of course, Copenhagen, which is right now probably our single most popular destination for study abroad. It's a wonderful city. The program, I think, there is very good. But Copenhagen, which I've visited, is probably the most expensive city I've ever been to. And so that's something to keep in mind, right? So that's what varies. Housing is paid directly to the provider, right? So the tuition bill for study abroad comes just the same way it would come if the student were on campus. Families pay the study abroad provider, I think in almost every case, directly for housing. And again, that fee will vary depending on the program and where the student's going. Another important thing to keep in mind in terms of health insurance, right? So the basic principle is, I think we all can agree, it's very important for students when they're abroad, just like any of us who are traveling abroad, to have adequate health insurance both abroad and in the United States, because of course, if something happens abroad, we become ill and it's something we can't resolve there and we have to come home, then the bills, we're going to come and we have to interact with the U.S. healthcare system. So you have to have insurance in both places. We have a form that we require students who've been accepted to study abroad to fill out for us before they go that basically indicates how they plan to be covered abroad. Some programs include the cost of insurance into the fee, the overall fee they charge for housing and whatnot. And they'll build in the health insurance fee. Other programs handle that differently. Some students will elect to be, we offer a health insurance provider. It's now called, I think, Geo Green. It used to be HTH, but it's an insurer that Tulane works with that we feel works pretty well for coverage that students might need abroad. In some cases, U.S. health insurance actually works abroad, but you just need to investigate that. So, so we ask students to certify with us how they'll be covered abroad. Very important to keep in mind that Tulane, since the students studying abroad are still fully enrolled Tulane students, they still have to go through the same waiver process that's run by Tulane Student Health Center as they would, as they do every year, right? So the way that adequate coverage in the U.S. is certified is by going through the online waiver that Tulane does, and then we ask, again, how they plan to be covered abroad. So those are important, I think, financial planning things to keep in mind. Where to study abroad? This is a student's favorite question, I think, and I understand why. This is the romance of it, right? Where do you want to go? Where have you been thinking about going for a long time? Or, where had you maybe not considered going? And we can suggest to you as something that fits your academic goals. So this map shows, areas where right now we have approved programs. We try to have approved programs in most world areas. What we're trying to do is meet the demand from students for languages that they can study at Tulane, that they may want to study abroad, countries that match their majors well. So we're constantly working to make sure that our portfolio programs is a good match for the students that we serve. Back here to how to study abroad, just to give you, and I won't go too deeply into the weeds, but just a few, I think a little bit of an introduction is helpful. So three basic kinds of programs that we have in our portfolio at Tulane. The first, and I would say maybe this is kind of the smallest group, but we'll always have them here, are direct enrollment programs, right? So this is sort of the study abroad classic, if you will. This is these kinds of programs are the origin of that term exchange student that we still kind of use to apply to all students who go and study abroad or come to the U.S. to study. And so this is simply direct enrollment means pretty much what it says, which is that our students go and they directly enroll in a university abroad with the objective of doing everything the way that the local students do, right? So to directly enroll is to say, I want to take my classes with foreign professors. I want to sit next to host country students. I want to experience their academic culture. And even the parts that sometimes may frustrate me, the classes are super interesting, but the calendar or every university has got their quirks. Every academic culture has their bureaucracies. All of that is kind of part of the experience that a direct enrollment student is embracing when they study abroad. This is something that within our portfolio programs that we offer in countries like Australia. We have a lot of students go to the University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, of course the United Kingdom, where we don't really have a language barrier to direct enrollment. We have an exchange program in Singapore, Ecuador. We just opened up an exchange program in Mexico City that is that's a direct enrollment program. So again, these are a minority of the programs in our portfolio. I think direct enrollment is something that's ideal for students who really want a lot of independence. If you have a student who is the sort of student who says, I want to study abroad and I really don't, I don't want to be grouped a lot with other American students. I want to be with a lot of Tulane students. I really want to kind of jump in and have that experience of what it's like to be a British student or a Mexican student or an Australian student. They should consider direct enrollment. We don't send Tulane students anywhere where they're kind of thrown in the deep end of the pool and just have to figure it out. All these universities have international student offices. All of them have pretty robust programs where they bring in students from all over the world. But again, those offices run more or less like our International Students and Scholars Office does at Tulane, right? They're designed to serve students from many countries, many cultures, with many different needs, it's a different experience from this next group of programs I'll talk about, which are these third-party programs, and these are the majority of the programs that we offer at Tulane. I would say that the thing that these third-party programs offer us is what they specialize in is study abroad for the student from the United States, right? So they understand the U.S. students very well. They understand their particular needs and challenges when they study abroad, and they're able to tailor the programs they offer abroad to things as simple and yet very important as like our academic calendar. They can offer a study abroad semester that's a U.S. semester and not, a Spanish semester or a UK term, things of that nature. But they can also do really interesting things where they can tailor programs to themes that are of interest to U.S. students. So, as you see on the slide, this group we work with, it's a bit of an alphabet soup. They're all, but they're all kind of specialize in this. CIE is one of the oldest study abroad exchange organizations in the U.S. It's been around since just after World War II. SIT has been around for a very long time, I think since the 60s. IES has been around since World War II. These are all nonprofit organizations that kind of specialize in study abroad. These theme programs, the example I'll give you is SIT. So what SIT specializes in is study abroad programs that serve students who want to do research overseas. So SIT is really good at choosing a theme that's of interest to American students and designing a semester, kind of curating a semester for them that culminates in an independent research project. An example, SIT is really popular with our public health students. They have public health programs in places like Argentina and Chile. And a student who goes on an SIT program for public health can count on being introduced to some of the key policymakers, academics, and practitioners in the field of public health in the country they're in. So there's lots of opportunities to kind of meet important, interesting people, to learn from them. And then at the end, they're prepared to do a one-month kind of independent research project in the field. Before I came into the position I'm in now, I used to work in the honors program, and I can tell you that a lot of these SIT independent research projects would come back and become like the seed of a senior honors thesis. So that's kind of one of the things that these third-party programs can do for us. The CIEE, IES, IFSA Butler, CET, what they can be really helpful with is sort of assisting with direct enrollment, kind of giving us a hybrid with a direct enrollment experience. So I think most of us in this field believe that direct enrollment is super valuable because that's the one way that our students really get exposed to different academic cultures. That's how they learn how, their peers, the future leaders from other countries, how they're educated, what kind of experiences they went through in a university, kind of what, how they approach issues. So we don't want to step away from direct enrollment, but again, there are certain practical matters that having a partner abroad can really help us with. So again, adapting to the academic calendar, setting up a direct enrollment that kind of matches the U.S. academic calendar, giving students advice as they move into these foreign universities, kind of understanding how the culture works, helping them select courses, helping them navigate the bureaucracy, helping them connect with other students through activities, buddy programs, things of that nature. These partners are really helpful to us with that. And of course, they're also very helpful in that they provide very robust student support, student services. In every case with these programs, you're going to have an on-site staff, an on-site director, people who are available 24/7 who are trained in dealing with safety, security, and other issues that our students may be dealing with when they're abroad, cultural adjustment. They also do programming, field trips, things like that. So that's another reason we like to work with these partners. And I would say about probably 2/3 of our programs are of this nature. The final group that I'll mention again are these faculty-led programs. So these typically happen in the summer, which is when faculty have time to do this. They get very enthusiastic about it. They like to think about, what could I do with my Tulane students in the summer? What could I do if I was teaching them, but not in the classroom here, but in the field? And so they'll develop these programs abroad. The list you see on this slide, these are places that, in some cases, we've had programs for many years. In some cases, they're pretty new. They may change during the time your student is at Tulane because faculty are always coming up with new ideas. Again, these are great opportunities for students to get to know their faculty in a totally different kind of setting and to earn Tulane credit. These are all Tulane courses taught by Tulane faculty. Most students will earn 6 credits abroad. Most of these programs are 4 to 5 weeks in duration. And they're a great opportunity. We'll have some students, rising sophomores. So between that freshman and sophomore year, you might have a student that says, hey, I want to start studying abroad now, and they'll do a summer program, and then they'll do a semester later. So there's lots of ways this can fit into a student's career here at Tulane. So that's something about the program models. Again, in terms of how to study abroad, these are kind of the things that our advisors will bring up with students, and we always encourage you we want you to know about that and to reinforce it where you see appropriate. When a student comes in and says that they can't decide where to study abroad or they want some advice, what we tell them to do again is, why do you want to do this? What's your top priority? And then choose your program accordingly. So if a student if their objective for study abroad is language proficiency, well, that's a pretty obvious kind of set of choices. They want to go to a country where they can get that immersion. We ask them to think about things like, homestays. How would you plan your semester abroad to make sure that you're getting the maximum exposure and practice in this language? Most of our students, it's important to point out, do not study abroad with language proficiency or foreign language proficiency as their prime objective. A little over 50% of our students will study abroad in programs where the language of instruction is English, even if the host country language is not. Denmark, again, is a great example of that. A lot of students of ours go to the Czech Republic. I could mention others. So in those cases where language is not the top priority, then we tell students, okay, let's think about which program is the best fit for your major. If you need to be earning major credit while you're abroad, we'll kind of help students align their choice with that. Some students will, I think, will plan differently, and they'll say, well, I've kind of completed my major requirements here at Tulane, and what I'm looking for in study abroad is to do something I can't do at Tulane, or that we don't offer as much of. I want to kind of round out my education. There are certain fields that we don't offer a lot of courses in here. One of my favorites to recommend to students is geography. Geography, I think if I could do it over again, I might be a geographer. It's one of my favorite social science fields. It basically is a license to think about and study anything that you would like to ultimately represent on a map or visually. And geography is a discipline that's really super developed in Europe. We've got great programs here in the United States too, and we've got one kind of great geography professor here at Tulane. But it's not something students can major in. And so, sometimes I'll encourage them to think about that, or they'll have their own they'll have obviously their own plans. A lot of well, pre-med students who say, of course, I've done my pre-med here and I can't really do pre-med abroad, but I want to get a foreign language. I want to work on that Spanish minor, and so we'll advise them accordingly. So again, it's just all about encouraging students to choose a program that fits their learning goals, their learning style, and also, as we said, to think ahead a little bit about the networks they might want to create for their careers after Tulane. I'll have, and this is again, ultimately, we respect all students' choices. What we do is we challenge and we ask them questions because we want them to articulate why they're making choices. But sometimes I'll talk to students who've invested a lot of effort in a foreign language, many semesters, and then they'll decide that for study abroad that they want to go some totally different direction. And at that point, sometimes they'll say, well, look, this is an opportunity that doesn't often come up, after graduation, to spend several months living in a place and using a language, and that can be really useful to you professionally after graduation. I mean, I think one of my most marketable skills after graduation has always been my ability to speak Spanish. And so I'll say, if you think about that and in terms of the choice you're making, or think, where might you want to work after school, or what country do you feel like, or region of the world do you feel like you might want to continue exploring, and let that influence your study abroad choices you're making. Okay. Very important detail, but a very important one we always like to bring up in terms of how to study abroad at Tulane, which is this distinction between the business study abroad or liberal arts and sciences. Very simple. If your student is a student in the Freeman School of Business and they want or need to earn business credit towards their business school major when they study abroad, they must do that through one of the Freeman School's programs. Freeman School has a portfolio of their own of exchange programs with business schools in various parts of the world. And these are programs that they've kind of pre-approved, and students can go on them and be confident that the business courses that they take abroad will transfer back to their business major at Tulane. All other students, and this includes business students, so if you have a business student who doesn't need to earn business credit abroad, but wants to go to do something else, maybe something in the liberal arts or the sciences, or if you've got a student in any other major at Tulane that wants to study abroad, they can choose from our courses, our programs that we have, our portfolio in the Office of Study Abroad that's on our webpage, and they can be confident that whatever program they choose, those courses will come back as electives. I guess I'll point out now that the way we do credit transfer for study abroad at Tulane is that sort of the first step in bringing study abroad credit back is as an elective. And then the second step is if students want those electives to count towards a major or minor, then that is the prerogative of the department, right? And so they go to the particular department. It's a fairly easy process that we've actually been able to kind of further facilitate by getting departments to pre-approve certain course equivalencies for study abroad, so that students know before they go that, hey, if I take this course abroad, when it comes back, it'll count towards this particular course in my major. So that's kind of the way it works. Again, but this distinction is that if a student wants a course they earn abroad to come back and transfer towards that business major, the only way that can happen is if they go through the business schools programs. And their kind of the timeline for the business school study abroad programs and the procedure that they go through to select students and nominate them for these exchanges is notably different from what we do in our office. It's not something that I oversee. So I think I really encourage students in the business school to get in touch as soon as possible with the Goldring Institute in the business school to kind of learn about the process. Mariette Thomas is the new director of study abroad there, and she's willing to talk to students as soon as they want to come talk to her about business school study abroad. A little bit more about preparation to study abroad. So again, before departure, Students need to think about language readiness if that is relevant to the country they're going to. And again, in many cases, there will be a requirement. All this information is on our webpage. If students look at a program, it will say if there's a language requirement, and it'll say what that is. So they do need to keep that in mind, because those really aren't things that we can be very flexible about. And so it's important for students to plan so that they don't kind of reach the time they want to study abroad and find that they've come up short in terms of their language preparation. Area studies courses. Excuse me a minute. Excuse me. So, so these courses, we say here that they're recommended. They're not required, but sometimes I think I might like to require them. I'll tell you why. So the idea here is that before students study abroad in a particular region of the world, they really ought to take advantage to the degree they can of the knowledge base that they can build right here at Tulane. We offer intro and upper level area studies courses in, again, fields like Africana studies, Latin American studies. And so it's important for students to kind of build that in before they go abroad. And there are a couple reasons for this. One is that they'll simply get more out of the experience. I think we can all understand that you don't really want the first thing you're learning about a country you're going to first semester to be, what you read in the Lonely Planet guidebook on the flight over, right? You really don't want to have to spend, why spend all that time learning basic things you could learn before you go if you studied. And if you build that base of knowledge once you get abroad, you can just go that much deeper, that much faster. This can also influence academics. I saw this a little bit. I was visiting a program of ours in Argentina where students directly enroll in the universities there. And I talk to them about, what are some of the challenges that students have. And they'll say, well, it's this issue when you go into a classroom, you can be very skilled in Spanish. So, you have a reading assignment or a discussion, and you can understand, the words on the page or what is being said. You understand the Spanish, but of course, if you don't have the context, if you haven't taken an introductory course in the history of the country you're going to, or other kind of area studies course, you're pretty limited in the context you can wrap around, the text that's being discussed or the topic that's being discussed. And as we all know, that's kind of what university level learning is about. It's about wrapping layers and layers of context around things so that we get deeper and deeper knowledge. And that's not something that you can sort of pick up on the fly. It's hard. It's to kind of say I've gotten in this class about, say, Argentine literature, and I don't know. I never took an introduction to Latin American history course. You don't have a lot of time to kind of do that on the ground. So it's really a good idea for students for all these reasons, for their academic success, for their ability to kind of get the most out of this experience, to take advantage of area studies courses to the degree they can before they go. We now have an optional, this pre-departure course taught by Dr. Annie Gibson. So she's our Associate Director for Intercultural Learning. And she's developed this really innovative class, which is more about helping students kind of clarify their goals for study abroad and to kind of begin to think pretty sophisticatedly about intercultural communication, ways to go into a new culture with some skills about how to think about that in a sophisticated way, how to navigate it. And so she calls it Preparing to Study Abroad. It's a 3-semester course, but each semester is just 1 credit. So students meet, I think, maybe 6 or 7 times a semester. So they meet the semester before you study abroad in person. When they go abroad, the course moves into an online mode, and then students are interacting with the instructor and with each other, reflecting on, kind of what's going on when they're in the field. And then the course resumes in its kind of in-person mode when they come back. And we find that this is something it's a really important phase of study abroad that we don't want to kind of neglect, which is the return. I think when study abroad is a good experience, it's something that changes you, that changes our students. and it changes them in lots of ways. And then all of a sudden they come back and they're back at Tulane, they're back home. And there's things that they need to, that they want to think about, that they want to sort through, that they want to kind of figure out, how is this experience, changed me, and they need a community to do that with. And so this course is one possible community for them to kind of a setting for them to think these things through. And we also have other activities that we arrange for return study abroad students to get to know other students who've been through it, and to get they think about the next step, right? Well, think about, what can I do with this experience now? We had, for example, about a month ago, a wonderful jam-packed session on study abroad and career planning, where we had people from the Career Center come in and talk to study abroad students about, how can I take this experience and represent it and use it as a way to explain to people the skills I've developed abroad, what I can offer, what I bring to the table, how to represent it on a resume. So we do things like that. Other preparation for study abroad, again, meeting with an academic advisor. This is something that, these are such important people in our students' careers at Tulane. Again, they're supportive of study abroad. They're aware of kind of what planning needs to go into it. And we encourage students to talk to them early and often about this. Students have to maintain a GPA of 3.0 to be eligible to study abroad. This is not something kind of we do to be arbitrary or to just sort of, keep students out. But in our experience, study abroad is a challenging experience. It's very enriching, but it's very challenging. In our experience, the 3.0 is it's a blunt indicator, but it's a relatively reliable indicator of kind of how a student's doing here at Tulane. And what we don't want to do is send a student abroad into a different academic culture, different setting, until they've really gotten their footing here at Tulane, which can often also be a reason for students to consider maybe going a semester later than they thought. If they don't have the GPA that they want to go in the fall, stay on campus one more semester, go in the spring and get the GPA up. And then finally, we encourage students, we require them to consult with their major advisors before they go abroad, because we don't want anybody, I'm sure you'll all be relieved to hear, we don't want any students to graduate late because of study abroad, and I'm not really aware of any kind of cases where students have graduated late because of study abroad. But we make them kind of check with people before they go so that they know what's, how to plan. And these are some study abroad resources, other online materials. Obviously, you'll have this presentation available to you. The first web address there is the web address of the Office of Study Abroad, which is that larger portfolio of programs available to all Tulane undergraduates. The second one, the Goldring Institute, is the Business School Study Abroad program, and there you can see the exchange programs that they have assembled that can count towards business school credit for business major credit. The Stone Center, we're very proud of our Stone Center at Tulane, best Latin American studies centers in the country, and they've been doing summer programs for a long time in the region, and you can learn more about them there and also on our webpage. And then, again, the advisors in the Advising Center, our study abroad advisors in the Office of Study Abroad are there for your students. The Study Abroad Fair is a really fun event. We have it every October. This year, we really had great attendance. I think we had over 400 students come in about 3 hours. And I got to greet them when they came in the room and give them a map of all the places they could go. And then I got to see them come out just, with their arms full of brochures and just kind of giddy with all the options. It was really fun, to kind of see how excited they were to think about what they might do. And so that's a good opportunity. There they can meet representatives from the different study abroad providers. They can meet exchange students at Tulane from the universities that they might be considering going to, study abroad alumni. So it's a great chance to learn about where they might want to go. Faculty, and this is almost the last thing I'm going to say before I go to questions, but I'm glad to finish with it. One of the things that all undergrads should take advantage of at a place like Tulane, which is, we're a small research university where, our faculty are here because they're skilled researchers and because they're kind of at the cutting edge in their field. But we're a small enough place that none of our faculty are too busy to talk to undergraduates, right? That's a lot of what they do. They teach them. They like to talk to them. They like to kind of to have an influence on them, to mentor them, to know what they to kind of help them shape this process of figuring out what they do well and what they want to do. And study abroad is just the easiest way, even for the shyest student. This is the easiest office visit you're ever going to have, which is, sign up for office hours and go ask a faculty member to write you a recommendation for study abroad. It's one of the easiest recommendations that faculty write. We don't require a whole lot of them in that. And really our objective is we want the students to talk to faculty. And so this recommendation gets them in there to talk to the faculty. And as you can imagine, a freshman or a sophomore going to a faculty member who, they know if they've gone to their web page and looked at what the faculty do, they say, oh, this faculty member, they do research in France, so I'm going to go talk to them because I want to go to Paris. And the student goes into the office and says, I'm thinking about studying abroad, and I think I might like to go to France, and I know that you've spent some time in France. And then you can imagine the conversation just takes off, right? This is the best conversation you can have in office hours, is with a student who's come in and they want to talk to you about your research and how you got involved and how you first went abroad to the place they want to go to. And it can really strike up a relationship that can, serve students in lots of ways. It's just an enriching relationship anyway. But then you can imagine when a student comes back from study abroad and maybe they want a recommendation for something else, they go back to that faculty member and say, hey, I want to tell you about, what I did abroad and what I got out of it. So it's a really great opportunity for these two groups of the most important people we have here at Tulane, which are faculty and students, to get to know each other, talking about a very important and very interesting thing. So with that, we're going to move to your questions, and I'm going to step away, and Penny's going to come and take your questions, and I'll answer them as I can.
Okay. This has just been wonderfully detailed, and you got some great insights from Scott, but I know you might still have questions. So I'll start going through those and having Scott answer those for you. So give me just a second to get set up here. I'll start looking through your questions. And then also remember that you'll get the slides, and so if something doesn't get, if you think of something later that you need to ask, you can email directly to the Center for Global Education, or if you need to send it to me and I'll send it along, that'll be fine too. So, so here's a question, Scott. My son is going abroad this spring 2017. As a parent, what resources do I have? I don't feel connected to the study abroad office and would like to hear about parent resources. The student visa process is very confusing and not much guidance is given. So the whole visa issue.
Okay, well, two things. So in terms of parent resources, we do have some parent FAQs on our webpage that we hope will be helpful. But if they're not helpful, we'd like you to call our office. The person that you should call and talk to is Peter Alonja. He's our Associate Director for Study Abroad Operations, and got a lot of experience in the field, and we know the FAQs don't always hit the target. And so if you've got a follow-up question, we're there to talk you through it. In terms of the visas, yes, we realize that the visa process can be frustrating. We're not able to really take a very hands-on approach to that, simply because, in the end, the entity that issues the visa, which is a consulate, they don't really recognize us as an interlocutor in this situation. And what we found is that us getting involved often complicates things more. Ultimately, when students go abroad, they're going to be responsible for their immigration status. They're going to need to understand it. Oftentimes, the requirements will change, and they could change without us knowing. And so, what we've done is really kind of try to, students with all the providers they go with, the providers typically, and I don't know if this is the case with this parent, will give some direction about the visa, when it needs to happen, how it has to happen, and students can call us with questions, certainly, but that's an area where we can't get too involved for fear that we'll further complicate what's already pretty complicated.
Okay, so here's another question, and I think there's another that might be kind of related to it, so I'll ask you too. The science engineering majors don't allow space for language courses.
Mm-hmm.
What relationships do we have that would offer English language and science curriculum? And then another question was, is it correct that a student in the biomedical engineering program is limited to Dublin for a study abroad program?
Huh. Yeah, well, so I'm glad. So I'll start with Dublin. Yeah, I mean, the two programs that I'm aware of that have most fit the needs of STEM students have been the UCD, the University College Dublin program is particularly good for engineering and biomedical engineering students. This Danish Institute for Study Abroad program in Denmark, we've had a lot of neuroscience students go on that and find courses that work for them. Our students who go to Sydney have found, particularly in psychology, but also I think in fields like ecology and evolutionary biology, they found courses that work for them. You know, typically direct enrollment programs can be good places for students to look for courses that fit in the STEM area. I mean, my understanding is that the program that has worked the best for biomedical engineering has been Dublin. We're always kind of looking for other options. I guess I wouldn't want to say that it's limited to that. We will not. It's not that we prohibit students from going on the programs, but I think that curriculum is kind of no way around it. That the BME curriculum is a pretty structured curriculum, and so we rely a lot on the department to advise students as to what they can do that will keep them on track.
And then the other question about science and engineering majors don't allow space for language courses.
Yeah.
Relationships we have that offer English language and science
right.
together.
So again, back to my
same
thing.
Okay.
And again, and I would just reiterate here that while study abroad has this mystique of being something that happens in a foreign language, in fact, most of our students at Tulane are doing this in English. And they're doing that because they come from many majors. And we've got students from pretty much every major who study abroad, and we'll at least bring some courses back towards major requirements.
Okay, here's another language-related question. My son was proficient in Spanish by the time he left high school. He did not take Spanish at Tulane. Can he go to a Spanish-speaking country if he doesn't have Spanish courses at Tulane? Is there a proficiency test that's offered, or do you waive any course requirements that they have to pass?
Yeah, we recognize that there can be individual cases that we'll look at. There is all students who study abroad where there's a language requirement are required to go to the language department and get a language evaluation. And that means they have to sit down with the professor and usually speak in the language, and then the professor evaluates whether they're ready to do this. And I have seen a couple of cases where students hadn't, they'd either studied in high school, or maybe this is a language they'd spoken earlier in their lives. And if the professor, in his or her judgment says, yeah, I think the student's ready to go, we'll make it happen.
Okay, so another question is, how many credits can you receive during a semester abroad?
Right. So students, the minimum that they have to remain fully enrolled, which means that the minimum is 12. If students are going to earn more than 19 credits abroad, if they think that's going to happen, we require them to get in touch with their academic advisor and make sure that that's okay, right? That they're not violating some kind of overload.
Which they have to do if they're here on campus anyway,
exactly,
too.
Exactly, right. So basically we're applying the same rules here. The rule about full enrollment is basically that the student they have to meet the full enrollment requirements both at Tulane and whatever applies abroad.
This might be about the special course that Annie does that you spoke about, but this question is, you mentioned 3 semesters of 1 credit courses. Can you do fewer than the 3 courses? So if let's assume that's about that special study abroad prep class.
We've designed them as 3 individual courses. We didn't want to make it so that because things come up, and if students can't finish the whole sequence, we don't want them to. We want them to get as much out of it as they can.
Okay, so whichever parent asks that, if that didn't get quite at what you're asking, then type in another question. So here's a question that's on the real logistical side. I've heard that housing is really hard to find, that students are on their own to find landlords. Do you all have landlords that you have vetted out?
The only, is there a specific program that person's, I mean, in general,
they didn't mention it,
the rule is that our students have to, in general, our students are on program approved housing, right? There are a few of those direct enrollment programs or exchange programs where students, they do have to find their own housing. They kind of know that going in.
Because when they go direct enrollment, it's like they're like a student in Spain,
right.
Or if they are a student of that university.
Right, but again, and even in those cases, so our program in Spain, I mean, that program has a pretty strict housing. They oversee the housing. They have a policy, but those students do go on to the housing market in Madrid, and they get their own apartment. Some programs see that as part of the pedagogy. Mm-hmm. One of the programs we work with in Prague does that too.
Okay. And I would think that's where connecting with the alumni, who, like the seniors who returned, can offer some advice about things like that. Do you find that happens?
They can offer advice, but a big caveat there, because again, even the programs that permit students to rent, and work kind of individual landlords, they've got policies and procedures that they work with as they do that. And what we don't want students doing is going around them and sort of saying, the senior stayed in this apartment and I just got it, because really the bottom line is that our students have to comply with whatever policies the partner has about housing.
Okay. So let's see here. If your student has a merit scholarship and wants to study abroad for a summer program, is any scholarship money available?
I would, that's a question that probably needs to go to a financial aid counselor.
Okay.
I think my understanding is that typically merit scholarships are only apply during the academic year.
For the semesters of the academic year.
There can be creases that they might find out with the financial aid advisor.
Now, they can apply for financial aid for the summer, can't they, for summer programs? Is that possible?
Yeah, again, we don't get too involved in that.
Okay.
So check with the advisor. I think that loans can sometimes be applied, but I don't want to go too much into details because I'm
the same way. I don't want to ever guess at questions related to
financial
fees or financial aid or scholarships. So I think this is just another thing where your student has to create sort of this network of consultants. So they need to be talking to their academic advisor, the study abroad office advisors, and their financial aid counselors to make sure they make good decisions. So let's see. Is your experience that study abroad is an individual experience for Tulane students, or some programs either by design or popularity group programs for Tulane students?
Oh, no, that's a great question. Some by design, right? So the SIT programs I mentioned, those research programs, they don't necessarily group Tulane students, but that kind of an experience, those public health programs I was talking about, it's like you're a group of students who share this interest in a particular field, and you're meeting all these experts, and you're kind of like a research team. Some programs kind of make it really impossible for you to, say, directly enroll in a local university or sort of immerse yourself more, because the design of the program is that you're working together with other American students on a common intellectual project. In other cases, sure, just due to popularity, we will have some big groups of students. The program in Denmark will have sometimes in the fall upwards of 50 Tulane students there, which I think ultimately is not a problem, because if you visit the program, you realize that the program itself has over 1,000 students who are there, and it's kind of like a small liberal arts college in Copenhagen. And the Tulane students will tell us, sure, I knew there were Tulane students here, but I didn't really see them very often. But this is something we try to make students aware of, because some students really don't want that to happen. They really don't want to be with other Tulane students, and we can kind of tell them which programs where they're more likely to kind of be the only one.
Okay. So here's another. Does Tulane Study Abroad offer ISOS or similar provider in the event of an emergency situation where perhaps a student would have to be evacuated?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. Yeah, Tulane, ISOS is who we work with, and so they provide us, they provide evacuation service. That's kind of the worst case scenario. But they're also, it's important to remember, ISOS is not health insurance, but it's this kind of very robust travel assistance program. So if a student, for whatever reason, finds himself in a situation where, they need to find out, kind of on their own, where's the closest doctor, where's the closest clinic, or, I need to get in touch with people in Tulane, they've got the card they can call ISOS. We find that's a relatively rare occurrence because most of the programs they're participating in are have this kind of wraparound, pretty robust presence on site of staff, and the first person they'll go to is their program director or student affairs person there. But yeah, ISOS is not just something we have available; it's something we require. So all students are enrolled.
Okay. Let's see. My sophomore student went to speak to his academic advisor in the business school. She advised him to take business classes this summer, so his options for abroad programs would be more varied.
Yeah.
Is this usual?
I don't know if it's usable, but I think it's good advice if he's in the position to take it. That's I think anything. I do feel like there's these two kind of competing things going on in study abroad now. One is what they call curriculum integration, which is this move to make it possible for students to be able to kind of continue doing what they making progress towards the degree while they're abroad and making sure everything transfers back. And that's important, and I get that, and we support that, and we help students in every way. With that said, it's nice if they can go with the more degrees of freedom they can take with them abroad in terms of, what kind of courses they can take. And foreign universities are foreign universities. We don't control them. So sometimes they may not offer a course that a student thinks that they want or need. And they can have less anxiety about that, if they've squared away a lot of their requirements here before they go abroad.
Okay, so here's a couple other business school questions. If a student's in the business school and has a specific school in mind, such as the London School of Economics, how would they go about beginning the process of making that happen?
Okay, so this is one where I'm not sure if the business school has an exchange with London School of Economics. If they do, then that'll be on the business school website, and they can go through the business school and they can do business courses at LSE. I'm not sure if they've got one. We do. So our office definitely has an LSE. It's a year-long program. You can only go for a year. But again, business students who have maybe they've done what the previous student we were discussing has done, and they don't need to earn business credits. They just want to go to LSE. They can come to our office and they can go to LSE like any other undergraduate.
And I'm wondering if perhaps that other question about the summer, we do have a business minor program that's a really intense summer program where students who are in other majors can earn a minor in one really full summer. So some students have gone that route if they have a major in liberal arts or science or something else. And so,
or the management minor.
Or the management. There's a management minor within liberal arts. So there's a couple other ways for students to go that direction without the full business school major, and then it might leave them some other options for things like study abroad or
I guess
double majoring.
Yeah, like I said, it's one thing about the business school programs to keep in mind, and this can again be kind of students have to decide what their objective is. All the business school programs I know of, the instruction is going to be in English, right? Mm-hmm. So if a student, if their objective is, I want to be in international business and what I want to bring to the table is not just my business curriculum, but also foreign language, they might think about, maybe I take my business classes at Tulane and then study abroad as a time when I develop the language piece. But that's just, it's kind of by the nature of these programs, that's a part of it. It's like the courses are in
English. So somebody asked for the name of the staff member you mentioned. So that's Peter Longia.
Alongia,
yeah. And you can write to any staff member at @cge.
No, it's actually if you go to our webpage, studyabroad.tulane.edu, and you click on the staff link there, everybody's name is there, their email address. If you click on their name, you can kind of see their bio and their responsibilities. But Pete is the one who handles parent questions.
And so when you get the PDF of the slides, you'll see that. It'll be hyperlinked and it'll take you to the website. So let's see, another question. So we were talking about, in some cases, the students have to find their own housing. So one parent asked, don't they live in dorms? Daughter wants to go to Madrid and she's in the business school. So different programs have different housing
Exactly.
options.
And it's part, and the housing, I think that the housing ideally is, students' housing choice is kind of also part of their overall pedagogical preference, right? I mean, because housing influences that. So if a student wants to learn a language, they probably should think about a homestay. And the thing students should keep in mind, sometimes they think about a homestay and they say, well, doesn't that mean I'm going to have all these restrictions and a curfew and all that kind of stuff? That's not typically the case, right? I mean, the homestay families know that students have come to experience the city, experience the place. And so we just ask students to kind of think about the homestay carefully because it can be a really great option. But yes, some programs have dormitories. I mean, the majority of the programs we work with, the option is either homestay or a dormitory that's arranged directly by the study abroad provider and kind of supervised by them. There's a minority of programs. Again, there's, I think, the program in Madrid, one of our programs in Prague, and maybe a few of these exchange programs where students can go out and with the assistance of the provider identify, trusted landlords and, housing options on their own.
Okay, so we're getting close to 8:30, so I'm going to make this one of the last questions, but I just saw a new one pop up. So tell me, Scott, if the website is still like this. When I've looked before, there's also this search function on the Study Abroad website that lets you select those different criteria.
Right.
And so you can select the country, you can select the type of housing,
right.
You can select whether or not a language is required, and then it'll sort out the things that you have and show you what's available.
And what I would say is, I will be honest with you, we are building that function out. So don't rule, if it doesn't come up in the search, don't rule it out. But we're building the search function so that students can search by major, you can search by housing option, et cetera. But I wouldn't want to say, just do that. If it doesn't pop up, we don't have it.
I think it's just another thing that's really important that you've already heard these things, and you can start asking your students this and think about those different dynamics of the experience, and then make sure they're just reading everything really carefully when they're researching the different programs so that they know what those different dynamics are for that particular program.
And asking us questions really at any time.
So here's, I think, what will make the last question. Do many students do one semester at one country and then a second semester in another country for a combined year overseas, or does that end up being two separate programs?
No, that's a good question. A number of students will do that. So within our, because most of the programs these days, at least for the study abroad providers, are really designed for a semester. Because most students are only doing a semester. So if you want to put together a year, say you're majoring in Spanish and Portuguese, and you might say, I'm going to do a semester, my fall semester with CIEE in Sao Paulo, and I'm going to do my spring semester with Middlebury in Buenos Aires, right? And you put together a year in two different cities and two different programs. So that's definitely doable and something students do. The only place where I would say you might get the more typical, just like the whole year, because the academic calendar sort of obliges it. Like LSE is an example. The only way you can do the LSE program is for a whole year. They don't give you the grades till the end of the second semester. In Spain, if you want to do direct enrollment, you either do it for the spring semester only or for the whole year. So there are a few cases like that.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your interest in this topic, and I just want to reiterate that you'll get the PDF of the slides, and then the full webinar will be up on the website in a couple of days. If you know other Tulane parents who are asking questions about this, then please direct them to parents.tulane.edu and to look for the webinars archive. If we somehow missed your question tonight, then please email either the Study Abroad office or me, and I'll make sure it gets sent on to them. I also always invite parents to send me feedback about the webinar and let us know if you found it useful, if it answered your questions, or if you have suggestions for other topics or other elements of this topic to address. If you have any feedback you want to type in now, you can do that. But I always encourage you to just write to me at parents, ENTS@tulane.edu. The next webinar in the series will be on Wednesday, December 7th, and that one is about the on-campus housing reapplication process for students, for continuing students. So I just have to reiterate what Scott said about what a transformative experience this can be. I feel like my study abroad program when I was in college was the single most transformative experience for me, and I actually had the opportunity to go on the Tulane Paris program in the summer back in 2003, and that was probably the happiest month of my life. So I can say wonderful things about the faculty-led programs that are offered as well. So I hope that you will consider this and help your student investigate this opportunity. And thank you so much for your participation. Good night.